Washington's about to be without a guy carrying over $12 million in cap hit right for the opener, and in a minute I'll tell you why the NFL benched him at the worst possible time. Johnny Newton, a second-round pick, tweaked his pec against Miami, and PFF already had him on their trade candidate list back in May. In a sec, I'll tell you if this speeds things up. Nick Cross signed for up to $14 million to come home, but Bleacher Report's calling him a possible bust for 2026, and I'll tell you if that risk is worth it. Raise hail. Okay, let's go step by step here because there's a lot of information flying around, and I want you to understand the whole thing, not pieces of it. The NFL confirmed this week that Dorrance Armstrong will be suspended without pay for the first regular season game for violating the league's personal conduct policy. The suspension officially starts August 30th, and Armstrong won't be eligible to return until September 14th. Do the math with me. That means he misses the opener against Philadelphia, a divisional rivalry game that was already going to be hell on its own, and he'll be available for the rematch against Dallas in week 2. Now, the part that actually hurts, the part that explains why the league acted this way, this stems from an incident back in May of 2025. Public records obtained by NICKI JHABVALA of The Athletic show Armstrong was arrested on May 10th of last year in Frisco, Texas on 2 misdemeanor charges: assault causing bodily injury and resisting arrest. He received what's called deferred adjudication on both charges, which is basically a legal arrangement where if you meet certain conditions over a set period, the charge doesn't stay on your record as a formal conviction. But pay attention, that doesn't mean the incident didn't happen. It means the Texas legal system gave him a procedural way out, not that he was found innocent. And this is where I want to be honest with you, bro, because this channel exists to tell you what I actually think, not to repeat what the team's PR cap says. What bothers me most about this whole thing is the timing. Armstrong is coming back from a torn ACL he suffered in week 7 last season against Dallas, the exact same opponent he'll now face only once he's finally available in week 2. This is a contract year, the final season of the 3-year $33 million deal he signed back in 2024 when he arrived from Dallas following Dan Quinn. According to Spotrac and Over the Cap, in 2026, he'll carry a cap hit of $12,055,000 with a $9 million dead cap hit if they release him. In other words, the organization already has a massive financial commitment to this player, and it's landing at the worst possible moment for a personal conduct issue to show up. Now let's get tactical, because I don't want to stay only on the legal and financial side. Before the ACL tear, Armstrong was playing the best football of his career. In his first 7 games last year, he had 5.5 sacks, generating 14 quarterback pressures, producing at a level of efficiency he never showed in Dallas, where he was a rotational piece behind Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, playing between 42 and 47% of the defensive snaps by his own free agency track record. In Washington, under the same Dan Quinn, who already knew him from Dallas, Armstrong found a bigger role and answered with real production. That's what makes this suspension sting more. This isn't a marginal player missing the opener, it's a player who had just proven the scheme was unlocking him. And there's something else you need to understand about the tactical context, because there's a roster stake here too. Washington spent the offseason rebuilding the pass rush. They gave Odafe away a 4-year, $100 million contract with $50.6 million guaranteed. They brought in K'Lavon Chaisson as additional reinforcement. In other words, Armstrong is no longer the #1 edge rusher on this team the way he was in 2024 and 2025. He's now a rotational piece who has to fight for snaps in a much deeper group. And a 1-game suspension right at the start, right when he needs to show his explosiveness, survive the knee injury, is exactly the kind of distraction this team can't afford. And the deeper problem, the one that goes beyond the Philadelphia game, is the internal competition. With Owie as the undisputed #1 edge after that $100 million deal, and with Chaisson added as another option, new defensive coordinator Durante Jones is going to have to make rotation decisions starting day 1 of the regular season. A player who misses the first game to suspension isn't on the field fighting for those reps in real time, and that gives a natural edge to the rest of the room, guys like Javonte Jean-Baptiste, to lock down rotation snaps before Armstrong even makes his season debut. My personal take on this: I'm not going to defend the indefensible. A charge of assault causing bodily injury is serious, it's real, and the NFL has every right to apply its conduct policy here. But as a fan, what frustrates me is that this team is coming off a 2025 season that partly collapsed because of a lack of discipline and off-field chaos in different areas, and we needed a clean training camp, free of noise, so Dan Quinn and Durante Jones could install the new defensive scheme without distractions. This is exactly the kind of noise we didn't want. Now, does this define Armstrong as a person? That's not for me to judge with the information I have. What I can judge is the football impact. One less game against Philadelphia in a year where every single NFC East game counts double. Here's the question for you, and I want you to answer it below in the comments. Do you think the NFL was fair with a one-game suspension considering the severity of the original charges, or do you think it should have been harsher? And the football question, do you trust Armstrong comes back in week 2 at the same explosive level he had before the knee injury? Or do you think this is the beginning of the end of his time in Washington? This one hurts to write, bro. And I mean that because I've spent 2 years watching this kid fight bad physical luck in a way that's honestly exhausting at this point. During the joint practice against the Miami Dolphins, Johnny Newton injured his pectoral. Dan Quinn confirmed he's in New York seeing a specialist, and the word several reporters covering the team used, including John Keim of ESPN, Ben Standig, and NICKI JHABVALA of The Athletic, was that it could be a longer-term issue. There's still no final confirmed diagnosis as of recording this, but the caution the organization is showing is not a good sign. Let me give you Newton's full backstory. Because understanding why this hurts so much means understanding the whole picture. He was the number 36 overall pick in the 2024 draft, second round out of Illinois, where he was an All-American in 2023 and a 2-time All-Big Ten selection. He signed a 4-year contract worth $9,757,000 with a signing bonus of almost $4 million and 86% of the deal guaranteed, confirmed by both Spotrac and Over the Cap. This is year 3 of that contract, and since he's a second-round pick, there's no 5th-year option, meaning if Washington doesn't extend him, Newton hits free agency after the 2027 season. Now for the frustrating part of his story. Newton entered the league behind 2 Pro Bowl defensive tackles, Jonathan Allen and Darren Payne. In his rookie season, he had to step up earlier than expected because Allen tore his pectoral, the exact same injury Newton is dealing with right now, and was lost for the rest of that season. Dan Quinn publicly praised him at the time for the pressure he generated from the interior against the Chicago Bears. But after that rookie year, Allen was released, and instead of clearing the runway for Newton to lock down the starting job, the front office signed Javon Kinlaw to a 3-year, $45 million free agent deal. And Kinlaw, let's be honest, has been widely called one of the worst free agent signings in the entire NFL from the 2025 cycle. So Newton, once again, got stuck behind someone else in line. And here's the piece of this story I think is the most important, the one almost nobody is discussing with the weight it deserves. Back in May of this year, Bradley Locker of Pro Football Focus listed Newton as one of the NFL's top trade candidates heading into training camps. Locker's reasoning is simple and it's blunt. Washington aggressively fortified its defensive line this offseason, and that directly hurts a player like Newton. His career overall PFF grade sits at 50 out of 100, with a career run defense grade of just 38.6. What's encouraging, according to that same report, is his pass rushing ability, a 9.3% pass rush win rate last year, which put him in the 63rd percentile of the league in that specific metric. Look at the full timeline of this kid's short career, because laying it out makes it even clearer. He fell from a projected first-round pick, 21st overall to Miami, all the way to 36 because of foot medical concerns, which according to Give Me Sport Analysis, cost him roughly $5 million in contract value just from that 15-spot slide. He got to Washington with a Jones fracture in one foot fresh off surgery, and during recovery discovered he had the same condition in the other foot. He missed almost his entire rookie preseason because of that. And now, in year 3, right when the calendar said it was time to lock down the starting job next to Payne, a pectoral injury shows up, the exact same injury that opened the door for him back in 2024 when it happened to Jonathan Allen. It's a cruel irony. The injury that gave him his shot is now the same one threatening to take it away, and I want to be fair in this analysis, because it's not all pity. The reason Pro Football Focus still watches him closely beyond the trade candidate status is that pass rush win rate of 9.3%. That's not a small number for an interior defensive tackle. It's the kind of metric that tells talent evaluators. This player has the motor and the get-off to pressure the quarterback from the inside even while the run defense still isn't there yet. If Washington decides to extend him instead of selling him, that specific metric is what justifies the bet. My opinion on this, and I want to be direct, Newton is not a failed player. He's a player trapped inside an aggressive roster build that decided to stack talent at his position without first resolving whether he was actually the right piece to develop. Adam Peters brought in Kinlaw, a total boom or bust swing, instead of investing that $45 million into locking down Newton as the clear starter of the future. And now, with this pectoral injury, if it turns out to be long-term, the trade conversation PFF already raised in May becomes even more urgent. Because if Newton loses development time in the exact year he most needed to show his real ceiling as a starter, Washington is left with a genuinely difficult decision heading into 2027. Do you extend a player who never got his full opportunity? Or do you let him walk and admit you spent a second-round pick and almost $10 million on a player who never found his place on his own team? I'm not saying Washington moves him right now, not at all. But if this injury turns out to be as serious as it sounds, and the team enters the regular season with Kinlaw as the undisputed starter and Darren Payne next to him, Newton's window to prove something gets even smaller. And that's a quiet roster building tragedy almost nobody is covering with the depth it deserves. And to close things out, bro, the story that on the surface makes you smile, but if you scratch just a little, there's a real tactical debate underneath it. Nick Cross came home. Born in Bowie, Maryland, raised at DeMatha Catholic, one of the most respected talent pipelines in the entire DMV. Cross signed with the Commanders this year after 4 seasons with the Indianapolis Colts, the team that drafted him in the 3rd round back in 2022. And this isn't some generic homecoming story. Cross told Scott Abraham of 7 News that growing up he idolized Sean Taylor and Clinton Portis, the same legends you probably grew up idolizing too if you're from this area. He played at Maryland at the college level after turning down offers from Alabama, Florida, and Auburn to stay close to home. This kid always wanted to be here, and on the field, the numbers back up the decision to bring him in. Since 2024, Cross racked up 266 tackles, the 2nd most among safeties in the entire league, trailing only Budda Baker. Last year, he was the 2nd most utilized safety in the NFL with 1,111 snaps, had the 3rd most solo tackles at his position, and generated the 2nd most pressures behind Nick Emenwari. Washington signed him for 2 years worth up to $14 million, according to Ian Rappaport, and the tactical logic is clear. Durante Jones needs a safety with range and versatility to disguise coverages, something Washington's defense didn't have last year, when explosive plays allowed were a recurring problem. But here's the part I have to tell you, because leaving it out would be dishonest. And this is exactly the kind of analysis this channel exists to do. Not everybody is this optimistic about the signing. Back in July, Mo Moten of Bleacher Report published an analysis naming Cross as a real candidate to be one of the worst free agent signings in the entire NFL in 2026. His argument, and I have to admit it's backed by real numbers. Since 2024, Cross has allowed 9 touchdowns through the air, and in back-to-back seasons, he's allowed a passer rating above 99 when targeted in coverage. In other words, the same player racking up tackles like a machine also has coverage lapses that a serious league analyst considers a real red flag. So where do I land on this? I'll be honest, I think both things are true at the same time, and that's the uncomfortable part of modern football analysis. Cross is a physically and consistently productive tackler, one of the best in the league by volume, and at the same time, his coverage numbers show a real pattern of vulnerability that Durante Jones is going to have to hide with scheme design, not just trust the player's individual talent to fix on its own. The question isn't whether Cross is going to make tackles. We already know that's happening. The question is whether Washington can afford another season of explosive touchdowns allowed in the secondary while waiting for maturity to fix the coverage issues. And there's a contract detail I want you to keep in mind because it changes the risk conversation. It's a short deal, just 2 years, up to $14 million per Ian Rappaport, nowhere close to a 5-year commitment that mortgages the roster's future. That gives Adam Peters a relatively cheap exit if the coverage pattern doesn't improve, and at the same time gives Durante Jones enough time to test different disguise schemes before committing real money to an extension. Compare that to what happened with Kinlaw, a 3-year, $45 million contract that's already being flagged as a bust halfway through. Peters learned, or at least structured this deal as if he learned, not to overexpose himself at a position where there's still real production uncertainty on an NFL field. Now, the comparison that actually interests me here is with Cam Bynum, the free safety who stayed in Indianapolis while the Colts let Cross walk. The Colts bet on Bynum as the anchor of their secondary and let Cross go, partly because they have internal belief in Hunter Wohler, the 2025 rookie who missed his entire debut season with a Lisfranc injury. That means Indianapolis, a team that knows Cross better than anyone after 4 years watching him play every single week, decided not to fight hard to keep him. That's not necessarily a condemnation. Teams let players walk for 1,000 cap and scheme fit reasons, but it is a data point any honest analysis has to put on the table before blindly buying into the homecoming hype. What I can tell you with confidence is this: the emotional hometown factor on this signing is real. A kid from Bowie, raised at DeMatha, who dreamed of wearing burgundy and gold since he watched Sean Taylor fly around the field, is here now. That builds a connection with the community money can't buy. But football isn't played on nostalgia, it's played on well-executed zone coverage. And that's where Nick Cross still has to answer the biggest question of his career. And there you have it, family. 3 stories, 3 different levels of analysis, and honestly, none of the 3 leave me completely at ease. But none of them leave me without hope either. Armstrong needs to come back in week 2 and prove with his play that the suspension was a stumble, not a trend. Newton needs that pectoral injury to not be as serious as it sounds, because this team can't keep losing the development of talented players to accumulated physical bad luck. And Cross has a chance to silence Bleacher Report by playing the kind of disciplined football this defense desperately needs after last year. This is what I love about covering this team. There's never a simple story. There are always layers, always context, and always a real reason to argue about it. I could be wrong on any of these reads. Look, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd rather give you the full analysis with the real numbers on the table than sell you the easy headline. And look, to close, I want to leave you with my public prediction, dated, with my name on it. Because on this channel, predictions get made with a name attached and get corrected on camera if I'm wrong. By the time we reach week 6 of the regular season, Armstrong is back in the rotational role he had before the injury, with no visible drop in his explosiveness. On Newton, my read is more cautious. If the diagnosis confirms it's long-term, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see his name in trade rumors right around the October window, once the front office has a clear runway to compare his market value. And on Cross, my bet is he finishes the season with over 100 tackles again, but also with at least 2 or 3 explosive plays allowed that have us yelling at the screen. Write it down, and if I'm wrong on any of it, I'll tell you right here when the time comes. So drop a like if this breakdown helped you out, subscribe if you haven't yet, because on Go Commanders, we're gonna follow every one of these threads until we get answers. And tell me down in the comments, out of today's 3 stories, which one worries you the most heading into the season? See you in the next one. Raise hail always.